Today we're going to jump into the powerful first-hand account of a young American soldier who's just arrived in Vietnam. And he didn't just land with his gear. He landed with this whole set of expectations about what this war was going to be like. Ideas shaped by all those heroic stories from his parents' generation.
And this, right here, was the core of it. This was what he truly believed, straight out of those old black and white newsreels from World War II. I mean, he actually pictured himself as a liberator, rolling through villages with people cheering, throwing flowers, totally convinced he was there to help.
But the reality he slammed into on his very first day, well, it was a huge shock. Instead of those cheering crowds, he was met with nothing. Total indifference. It was like he was invisible. The romantic image in his head just shattered against this perplexing reality where, to him, the people looked funny and the whole country smelled bad. That disconnect was immediate and, honestly, deeply unsettling.
So that initial confusion, yeah, that was just the beginning. The real turning point, the moment that would completely shatter his entire worldview, came just 3 days into his tour.
So, 3 days in, he and the corporal he's supposed to replace get sent on what sounds like a routine task. They just had to go meet a transport that was carrying a group of locals who'd been rounded up.
And it's really crucial we understand this word. These were not enemy soldiers. Detainees, that was a classification for civilians. Old men, women, kids, people who could be held for questioning. They were, by definition, non-combatants.
And this is the scene he walks into. As these big, flat-topped vehicles roll in, the Marines up on top just start throwing these civilians to the ground. They were bound hand and foot, couldn't even break their fall. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In his mind, these were the exact people he was there to protect.
So he grabs his fellow soldier's arm, asks what in the world is happening, and this is the response he gets. A cold, chilling warning. And right then, in that exact moment, he realized that the war he had been sent to fight was not the war he was expecting, not even close.
So, it becomes painfully clear that the enemy isn't some distinct army wearing a different uniform. The lines were just gone. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere, completely indistinguishable from the very civilian population he thought he was supposed to be helping.
And the danger was constant. His battalion, which was about 1,000 men, faced around 75 incidents of mining and sniping every single month. The threat was absolutely relentless. It was everywhere.
But here's the part that really messes with your head. Despite those 75 attacks a month, in his first 8 months, he saw only 4 armed enemy soldiers. Just think about that for a second. They were fighting a ghost, taking casualties day after day, with literally no one to fight back against. All that anger, all that fear, it had nowhere to go, except, maybe, towards the civilians who were right there in front of them.
And all that frustration, it led to a profound and, frankly, tragic realization. He started to understand that the actions of the U.S. military weren't ending the conflict. They were actively fueling it.
He just witnessed this grim, repeating cycle. It would start with a single sniper shot from a village. In response, an airstrike might be called in. Then, the troops would go through, searching and burning whatever was left. He realized that for the Vietnamese people who survived all that, the choice was pretty simple. The Viet Cong didn't need to terrorize them into joining. The U.S. military was creating all the new recruits they could ever want.
And this led him to a devastating conclusion. The war was a self-perpetuating machine. From his perspective, the U.S. presence was literally manufacturing its own opposition. The very act of fighting was just making the war bigger.
So you have this growing gap between the official story and his daily reality, and it triggers this intense internal battle. The physical war was hell, for sure, but the psychological war, that was something else entirely.
And these are the questions that start to bubble up. Simple questions, right? Direct, but absolutely terrifying. Because once you start asking them, you can't just unask them. And the potential answers? Even scarier. He used this really powerful metaphor to explain what he did next. Confronting that why was like opening a door to a dark room full of wild animals. You can hear these awful noises, but you can't see what's inside. And you definitely don't want to step in. So he backed away. He shut the door. He just stopped asking.
He felt like he was trying to play a card game, but with only half a deck. Nothing he saw made any sense because he was missing the most important cards, the political stuff, the history, the whole backstory of why America was even in Vietnam. All he knew was that what was happening on the ground was, in his own words, nuts. So he retreated. He stopped thinking about the big questions.
His entire world, his entire purpose just shrank down to a single tiny goal: stay alive until his tour was over. His war wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was just about reaching a date on a calendar. And then, finally, that day came. And his exit from the war was just as sudden and chaotic as his entry into it, leading to this strange, kind of ambivalent journey home. Get this, he's in the middle of a firefight in Hughes City when his lieutenant pulls up in a Jeep and just yells, "The orders are in, let's go." He strips off his gear, hands it to his buddies, and within 10 minutes of finding out he was leaving, he's on a helicopter, the Freedom Bird, flying 3,000 feet above the battle he was just in.
And this is the final, poetic image of his return. After everything he'd seen, his first glimpse of home from the Oakland Bay Bridge wasn't some welcoming sunrise. It was an impenetrable fog. I mean, what a perfect metaphor for the confusion, the ambivalence, and the deep uncertainty he felt about coming back to a country he didn't even understand anymore.
He survived, he was physically home, but his testimony leaves us with this huge, lingering question. It just captures the inescapable paradox of his experience, and the experience of so many others, in a war that only seemed to get bigger the harder they fought.